Good day everyone, I am Christine Tinandayan, your first virtual teacher. Today, me and my fellow instructors will discuss about the typical and atypical development among children. At the end of our 60-minute lesson, the students are expected to first understand the importance of typical and atypical development among children. Second, explain the importance of stages of child development and the different domains of development. Third, explain the difference of typical and atypical development among children. And lastly, cite the milestones of typical and atypical development. Before we proceed to our discussion, Sir Clark will give us a short motivating quote.
Before we jump to our main topic, we would like to share this quote taken from Eileen Kennedy Moore. The path of development is a journey of discovery that is clear only in retrospect, and it's rarely a straight line. It's unique to every child. Others have curved or zigzagged, but with the right approach, we would be able to help them in their needs.
Thank you so much, Sir Clark. That was really inspiring. Now, without further ado, let's get started with our discussion. Have you ever wondered how children develop? Maybe at one time you have compared your development with that of a sibling or cousin of yours. If this is the case, then you are interested in child development, which is the pattern of growth, change, and stability that occurs from conceptions up until adolescence. It also refers to the sequence of physical, language, thought, and emotional changes that occur in a child from birth to the beginning of adulthood. During the early 20th century, interest in child development began, specifically that which focused on dissecting abnormalities. Certain theories were discovered based on this interest to appreciate the growth that children experience from birth to adolescence. So, what are the child development theories? These are psychosocial development theory of Erik Erikson, cognitive development or developmental theory of Jean Piaget, socio-cultural theory of Lev Vygotsky, and social learning theory of Albert Bandura. During our past lessons, we had already tackled these famous theories, so I will just give you a short recap about it. First, Erikson's psychosocial theory is composed of 8 stages that describes the changes and conflicts encountered by an individual through social interaction in a lifetime. On the other hand, cognitive developmental theory focuses not only on how a child's intelligence increases with age, but also on how children gain knowledge. In contrast, sociocultural theory believes that children learn actively through hands-on experience. Culture and social interaction also plays an integral role. Last but not the least, the social learning theory of Bandura believes that learning takes place through observation and modeling. As a child observes the actions of the people in the environment, new information and new skills are developed. What is the importance of child development? Child development is important to ensure that a child meets his or her developmental milestones. It is crucial to observe and monitor his or her development. The milestones that needs to be mastered usually at the same rate act as a guide for ideal development. It is done by checking the progress of a child based on his or her age to see if the child is developing within expectations. For others, checking the milestones can help detect any difficulties at a particular stage. Interventions can then be given which can help in the development of a child.
Good day everyone, I am Neil Adrian Maestrado, your second virtual teacher. And today, I am going to discuss to you the domains of development. Human development has 4 major domains: the physical development, the cognitive development, the social emotional development, and the language development. Each domain, while unique on its own, has much overlap on each other. It is better to understand this concept because this domain can be traced back to the human development. First, what is physical development? Physical development is the biological changes that occur in the body and brain, including changes in size and strength, integration of sensory and motor activities, and development of fine and gross motor skills. Physical development in children follows a directional pattern. Muscles in the body's core, legs and arms develop before those in the fingers and hands. Children learn how to perform gross or large motor skills, such as walking before they learn to perform fine or small motor skills, such as drawing. Muscles located at the core of the body become stronger and develop sooner than those in the feet and hands. Physical development goes from the head to the toes. The physical development helps the child to achieve developmental goals, especially the child's health is influenced by nutrition and illness. Because children are prone to diseases, their immune system is still developing, and they need a healthy diet to grow accordingly to the domain of physical development. Motor skills are actions that involve movement of muscles in the body. There are two kinds of motor skills. This is the gross and fine motor skills. Gross motor skills and fine motor skills develop during infancy and toddlerhood. What is their differences? Gross motor skills involve mastery of large muscle movements, as well as the building of strength in muscle groups like the arms, legs, and core. Example of this is reaching, rolling, crawling, walking, and climbing. On the other hand, fine motor skills involve smaller and more precise movements of muscles in the body. It largely involves the hands and the fingers. Example of this is a child pointing on another object, a child that is grasping another object, and another one is clapping. When we say gross motor skills, it involves large muscles or group of muscles in the body, especially when we sit, stand, walk, run, and keeping balance and changing our positions. While fine motor skills is using especially the hands to be able to eat, draw, dress, play, write, and do many other things. The second domain is cognitive development, which is defined as the changes in the way we think, understand, and reason about the world. Example is an infant which is not able to count numbers, but through the stages of cognitive development, she finally knows how to count numbers. In short, the cognitive domain includes intellectual and development and creativity. As they develop cognitively, children gain the ability to process thoughts, pay attention, develop memories, understand their surroundings, express creativity, as well as to make, implement, and accomplish plans. Cognitive skills are thinking skills including learning, understanding, problem solving, reasoning, and remembering. The third domain is the social emotional development. The social emotional domain includes a child's growing understanding and control of their emotions. They also begin to identify what others are feeling, develop the ability to cooperate, show empathy, and use moral reasoning. This domain also includes developing attachments to others and learning how to interact with them. For instance, children learn how to share, take turns, and accept differences in others. They also develop many different types of relationships, from parents and siblings to peers, teachers, coaches, and others in the community. Children also develop self-knowledge during this domain. The social-emotional development involves social skills, including interaction with other people, having relationships with family, friends, and teachers, which corresponds to cooperating and responding to the feelings of others. The fourth domain is the language development. It refers to the process of acquiring language in a consistent order without the need for explicit teaching from the environment. Examples of language development are baby cooing or baby pointing to show what he wants. Language development is dependent on the other developmental domains. Infants understand words before they can say. In other words, comprehension precedes production of language. The ability to communicate with others grows from infancy, but children develop these abilities at different rates. The language development has language skills, like speaking, using body language and gestures, communicating, and understanding what others say. To sum it up, domains of development are important because it helps us understand the areas of child development and aid us in identifying the child's strengths and areas in which they need to improve.
Thank you so much, Sir Neil, for that informative lessons. Hi students, it's me again, and I will be discussing the stages of child development. Did you know? Stages along with age are used as ranges to mark significant periods in a human development timeline. In each stage, growth and development occur in the four domains mentioned earlier by Sir Neil. So what are the 5 stages of child development? The first stage is newborn, which refers to children from birth to about 2 months of age. At these times, they exhibit automatic responses to external stimuli. The second stage is infants, and they develop new abilities quickly in the first year of life. At 3 to 6 months, an infant can control his head movement and bring his hand together. By 6 to 9 months old, an infant can sit without support, bubble, and respond to his name. Between 9 and 12 months old, a baby can pick up objects, crawl, and even stand with support. The third stage is toddlers, which refers to children ages 1 to 3 years old. At this time, toddlers learn to walk without help, climb stairs, and jump in place. They can even hold a crayon, draw a circle, stack one block on top of another, use short sentences, and even follow simple instructions. The fourth stage is preschool, which refers to children ages 3 to 5 years old. At this time, preschoolers refine their motor skills. They can throw a ball overhand, skip and hop, stand on one foot for 10 seconds or longer, dress themselves, and draw a person with features. Lastly, the fifth stage is school age, which refers to children ages 6 to 12 years old. They are capable, confident, independent, and responsible. Peer relationships, particularly relationship with friends of the same gender, are important to school-age children. The older school-age child begins to develop sexual characteristics. Class, did you know? The development of a child usually follows a predictable pattern. There are certain skills and abilities that are observed to gauge a child's bubbling and following directions. However, each child is unique, so not all of them can reach a milestone at the same time. Thus, typical development and atypical development occur. So, what is typical development? Typical development refers to the normal progression where the child grows by acquiring knowledge, skills, and behavior called developmental milestone at a certain time frame. So to be specific, what are developmental milestones? Developmental milestone refers to physical or behavioral signs of development of infants and children. Example of these are skills such as taking a first step, smiling for the first time, and waving bye-bye. On the other hand, atypical development happens when development doesn't follow the normal course. A child is developing atypically when he or she reaches a milestone earlier or later than other children his or her age. It could include things like learning and social disabilities and disorders. In short, atypical development can manifest in different ways, especially in children. For example, there can be physical delays such as a delay in gross motor skills, or there can be cognitive dysfunction such as inability to focus into something. How do we identify if a child is developing typically or atypically? Well, according to research, there is no clear way to identify if a child is developing typically or atypically. However, there are three common accepted principles of child development that one should look into. The principles are as follows. The first one is rate of development differs among children. This means that children grow and develop at different rates. While their developmental pathways may differ, most pass a set of predictable milestones along the way. A child can be a bit ahead or a little behind at a certain age. This is normal. Most of the time, given the right nurturing and stimulation, all children will be able to catch up in the end. Second, development occurs in a relatively orderly process. This means that development occurs in a predictable and organized manner. It has a sequence of steps that consistently follow one another. Development is a continuous process. Most development changes happen slowly and are apparent over time. Third, development takes place gradually. This means that continuous development emphasizes that development and changes in individuals occurs little by little. The next topic will be discussed by Sir Clark. Thank you for listening.
Before anything else, let me first emphasize that we should always keep track of a child's developmental milestones from infancy until they grow up, because milestones tell so much about the child. Are they showing significant delays or having a different patterns in achieving major milestones? For a 5 and 4-year-old child, it is so much easier to know whether they are manifesting healthy and normal development, or should be worried because they show a number of delays. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. But we will only focus on 4 and 5-year-old children. First, the typical and atypical milestones of a 4-year-old child in terms of social, emotional development domain. It is typical when a child enjoys doing new things, and atypical when a child sticks with routine. Creative in make-believe play versus doesn't manifest at all. Cooperates and plays with other children versus ignore people other than his family and would rather play alone. Plays mom and dad versus plays all by himself. Talks about likes and interests versus couldn't express his preferences. Socially and emotionally, a 4-year-old kid loves people, especially when they're dealing with kids. Raise your red flags if they don't deal with people and sticks to routines. Be more alarmed if they also prefer to be alone. And worry if they don't express what they want or doesn't talk at all. It would be wiser to seek professional help, because those things are red flags to something serious like autism and other issues. One more thing, Kids at this age doesn't know what is real and what is a make-believe. So it is advisable to feed them real things because there is a right age for fantasy. Typical and atypical milestones in terms of language and communication. Knows the basic grammar rules versus speaks unclearly. The story versus can't retell at all. Names, colors, and numbers versus loses skills once had. Loves talking versus doesn't communicate at all. A 4-year-old kid were already capable of expressing their thoughts and ideas. They already know how to sustain a conversation. They literally love talking, especially to other kids and people close to them. If they couldn't talk or still in the stage of babbling, talking to the doctor and having the child evaluated would be a wise move. The typical and atypical milestones in terms of cognitive development domain understands the idea of counting versus couldn't count at all, can follow commands and instructions versus doesn't follow commands, and understands idea of same and different versus doesn't understand at all, starts to be time conscious versus doesn't know the concept at all, plays board games versus doesn't show interest at all, attempts to predict what will happen versus not manifesting that skill. The indication in having delays in cognitive skills is really serious. Cognitive is a major issue in terms of development because it may entail major delays in other areas as well. If it does, maybe the child has epilepsy, cerebral palsy, or Down syndrome, among others. If it only manifests in cognitive skills, most probably your child just have below average intelligence. The typical and atypical milestones in terms of movement and physical development. Hops and stands on one foot versus can't jump in place. Catches a bounce ball versus couldn't jump at all. Pours, cuts, scribbles versus having difficulty in doing practical life skills. Those I mentioned refers to gross and fine motor skills. Come on, if those are not manifested in the child at 4 years old, you should be alarmed, especially if there is a delay in gross motor skills because it requires specific intervention and resolves as the child continues to grow. Kids, especially the 4-year-old, should already master his body-muscle coordination, balance, and movement. Seeking for professional help is the wisest thing to do. Now let us talk about 5-year-old kids in terms of typical and atypical development in terms of social and emotional domain. Usually, kids at this age want to please others and be like friends versus withdrawn, not active, not responding to people. More likely to agree with rules versus the opposite who doesn't follow at all. Shows concern and sympathy versus doesn't show a wide range of emotion. Like to sing, dance, and act versus doesn't have any interest at all. Show more independence and shows gender awareness versus kids who are dependent and confused. They are sometimes demanding or cooperative versus shows a range of negative emotions. Did you hear the red flags? Those are really freaking me out. Dependence, deviance, showing a wide range of negative emotion entails a lot of problems. The best thing to do is to seek for professional intervention. Now let us move to the typical and atypical milestones in terms of language and communication domain. Well, a 5-year-old kid typically shows clear speech, tells story in full sentences, says name and address. On the other hand, atypical milestones are unclear in terms of speech. They don't talk about daily activities, or even worse, they couldn't talk at all. Can't say a name and their address. Well, those red flags are really serious. Don't wait another month to ask for help, because those things need serious attention. Now let's talk about the typical and atypical milestones in terms of cognitive domain. Well, typically kids can count up to 10 or more things versus Luce's skills he once had. Can draw a person with at least 6 body parts versus couldn't draw at all. Can be focused versus easily distracted. Copies geometric figures versus couldn't do that at all. Can tell what's real and what makes believe versus cannot tell at all. The typical milestones in cognitive development at the age of 5 should be taken seriously. Talk to the teacher, their developmental pediatrician, and weigh what you can do to help your child. Having evaluated is really a big help for us to find the right approach in helping a child. Typical and atypical milestones in terms of movement and physical development. The child at this age should be prepared for sports, but if there are serious delays or red flags like balancing, gross motor skills, and the like, it's a different story. We shouldn't waste time to seek for professional help. Doctors, the developmental pediatrician can really be a big help.
Thank you so much for listening. That's the end of our discussion, and we hope that you were able to learn something. Thank you for listening.